Hello and welcome. You are watching In Your Interest here on News 9 Live. I am Krishna Kumar. First up, a check on all our headlines. The Sensex and the Nifty close flat as FMCG stocks slide on weak urban demand. Nifty Bank Index outperforms, gaining nearly 300 points to touch 51,500 with HDFC Bank boost. Chip giant Nvidia CEO Jensen Huang announces artificial intelligence infrastructure partnership with Reliance Industries, emphasizing India's strong talent pool and prior commitments to develop AI supercomputers and language models. Reliance Group Chairman Mukesh Ambani expresses gratitude to have partnered with Nvidia. IndusInd Bank reports 39% fall in net profits for the second quarter, despite a 5% rise in net interest income. The results falling short of market expectations. India's Union Cabinet approves nearly 6,800 crore rupees for major railway projects in Andhra Pradesh and Bihar, including the doubling of key rail lines and new construction. A group of ministers proposes GST cuts on life and health insurance premiums to provide financial relief to individuals and families having insurance coverage, with a special focus on senior citizens. You are watching In Your Interest, and first up, the big story we're taking up is the rising pollution levels in the national capital Delhi and the national capital region around it. Air pollution, a problem that everybody in Delhi and the national capital region feels at this time of the year. But very few really talk about what kind of economic impact it has in terms of the hidden costs it brings to daily life. On the 23rd of October, the Supreme Court of India came down heavily on the central government and the state governments, criticizing them for making our environmental laws practically toothless. The court highlighted how the penalties for crop stubble burning outlined in the Commission for Air Quality Management Act of 2021 have not been enforced properly at all. To put it in simple words, the laws are there, but the machinery to implement them is completely missing. The government has promised that penalties will be implemented in 10 days, but the damage is already done. The Supreme Court of India also criticized the state governments of Punjab and Haryana, questioning them as to why stubble burning continues if there are supposed to be consequences. Despite registering over 1,000 FIRs against offenders, Punjab has only collected fines from 473 people. The big question that remains: who exactly is paying the price? Well, the answer is simple: you, me, and everyone living in and around Delhi. For the day, Delhi's air quality was recorded as quote-unquote very poor, a figure that shows up on your app, but the real impact shows up in your wallet. Masks, air purifiers, medical visits, the costs just keep adding up. In fact, a study by Suffer found that by simply following air quality guidelines, Delhiites could save up to over 1,000 crore rupees annually in healthcare costs. But here's the catch: an air purifier can cost anywhere between 10 to 15,000 rupees. For a city with an average per capita income of around 2,72,000 rupees per year, that's no small expense. And for those with respiratory issues, the financial burden is even higher. And to make matters worse, even government ministries are feeling the heat. An RTI revealed that 6 central government ministries in Delhi spent 50 lakh rupees on air purifiers in just one financial year. And guess what? That's taxpayers' money, which is your money, my money. Air pollution is not just an environmental issue. It's an economic one, with Indian businesses losing 7 trillion rupees annually. the end of the day, it's the people, especially the vulnerable, who are left to pay the price. We have some very special guests joining us to help us understand what's going on. We have Dr. Srinath Sridharan, policy researcher and corporate advisor. Srinath, we keep talking about this all the time and nothing has changed this year as well. And even the top court of this country is saying the same thing.
Hi, this is a very sad incident, right? It repeats, behavior has not changed. Behavior of the governments, the policyholders, the state governments who promise heaven and earth, nothing has changed. And while you spoke about the economic impact of it, the reality is the quality of life that suffers and the health issues and the people, what we go through is health. It's almost like smoking a couple of packets of cigarettes a day. Imagine kids, youngsters, senior citizens who are actually growing up there in CR. And I think pollution as a word itself doesn't feature in the importance of any of the Indian governments, the state as well, state governments as well. We tend to think that it can be solved by conversations, it can be solved by penalties. It won't be. In this case, we're speaking about, let's say, air pollution. But what about noise pollution? That's something that we have in India all across. So the sad part about it needs the attention of the Supreme Court. But let me flip it the other way around. Okay, the Supreme Court tomorrow says I'm going to penalize the state. Do you think the state is actually going to change, or just simply sign that check and say, okay, we have penalized me 5 crore rupees? And that's my worry. Everybody wants to claim that they're acting on something, but nothing has changed behaviorally. Of course, I'm very fair to be saying that all of us have to change in our behavior. But reality is, it is not seeming to be a policy priority at all.
We also have Mr. Lloyd Matthias now joining us. Lloyd, great to have you on the show. You are from Delhi and the National Capital Region. You work, live around here. And so do I. And we keep having this conversation year after year. And what we have to say, it's as if the Supreme Court of India just pulled the words out of our heads.
Absolutely, Krishna. I think it's tragic that year on year we have the same woes, we repeat the same issues. I think pollution in Delhi is not a new occurrence. It's been happening over the last decade. I think the last few years it's gotten to a very critical state when actually for a lot of people, it's asking a very existential question. Do we want to continue to live in the National Capital Region and subject ourselves to an obvious health hazards, ourselves and our families? Or are there any other better places where we can move to? And I think when it comes to this stage, I think it's a crisis. And I completely agree with what Srinath said. I think our administrators and political authorities have been toying with this for too long. I think this is a state of emergency, right? This is not something that will just go by after a week or two. I think this is an annual occurrence, right? Come every November, we see the same problem. And all the things we know are not new, right? Delhi is landlocked. You have this farmers burning stubble all around. This, coupled with atmospheric conditions, Delhi's large percentage of vehicular population, I think this makes critical year on year. And it's tragic that every year we're doing the same thing with absolutely zero accountability. And it's not about pointing fingers to any political party. I think our entire political establishment, whether it's the central government, whether it's the state government, whether it's the states in the vicinity of Delhi, I think are all answerable. And I just think, if this doesn't change, I think Delhi or the national capital will lose its competitive edge, right? Today, businesses have been relocating here the last 2 decades, from Bombay and from elsewhere in the country. I think we're about to see the change in the situation. People are generally going to be looking at options to move out of the NCR if we are not going to, solve this issue soon enough.
All right, that's what we're discussing over here. The economic impact of pollution, which starts from individuals losing money on an annual basis to healthcare costs and buying air purifiers and other things to deal with the pollution, to businesses losing money. Then you have times when work and productivity gets hit and businesses get hit consequently, and overall the GDP of Delhi and the National Capital Region gets hit simply because they haven't found a solution to a critical problem.
And I think in that sense, pollution at one level is a basic hygiene issue, right? It's what, it's basically about concerning people's lives. Everything else in terms of enhancing quality of business, better taxation, I think all that comes much later. I think this is an absolute base ladder of any economy, right? If you don't get basic infrastructure and right, which is basic pollution, basic law and order, I think everything else doesn't matter. And I think that's the issue that I think our administrators haven't understood. And I seriously think for a lot of businesses, this is going to be a question that they're going to ask themselves. I do know of a couple of businesses that have effectively relocated, right? They moved out of the national capital region. I think it's a matter of time before this becomes an exodus. And therefore, I think to solve it, it would take much more than just the anguish of citizens. I think all policymakers, large builders, industry, all have come together and have to address this issue on a war footing.
All right. Srinath, you're talking about essentially what is an agricultural issue impacting, one of the startup hubs of this country. Startups and companies want to move out of Delhi NCR region because a solution to disposing of agricultural waste has not been found. You had the MS Swaminathan report which spoke about the better ways of disposing, farm waste. Clearly, none of that has been taken up, and it has been the issue has been allowed to fester to the point where it has reached a critical crisis mode.
I want to make 2 points here, Krishna. It is true that almost agriculture and agriculturalists are a very politically sensitive, touch-me-not cohort. Anything around them, we seem to kind of shy away without taking a strong stance. That's one. Two, I think to Lloyd's point, I want to just add, he's right in saying that I think businesses are relocating. If you look at Bombay, Bangalore, NCR, the civic infrastructure is collapsing. The quality of life is terrible. We all keep speaking about pollution of various sorts, traffic jams, and essentially poor quality of life. And which comes to the question that I have in mind. Is it our economic handcuffs that in hope of earning more and living in those cities that we are actually worried about environmental degradation? And this kind of urgency doesn't seem to affect anybody in policy and polity at all. Everybody gives very grand looking statements year on year, signs a report, whether it's in the parliament or the assembly or think tanks, but yet nothing happens. And why is it? I think it is simple. Our government's not accountable to promising quality of life. If it means taking stern action against agriculturalists, I think that's the challenge. It's a holy grail. How do we overcome that policy inertia around agriculturalists? I think we all need to figure out, is there a political angle because it's a vote bank and nobody wants to touch? Or is it really the respect for the annadatas that we keep talking about?
Lloyd, one last question with you before I wrap this discussion up. Tell us what can be done from here on, because this is a problem that is not just about the citizens' anguish, citizens complaining. This is a problem from where business money from could be drained out of Delhi and the National Capital Region.
Was this for me, Krishna?
Yes.
Yeah, I think, like I said, the first thing is, everyone needs to come together and define clearly what are the clear action steps. We clearly understand that one of the big instigators, one of the big issues really is about stubble burning, which is true. But I think there are other factors that come into play. I can tell you all across NCR, construction dust is a big area, right? We just know the levels of construction happening in a lot of these places. I think that's a big contributor. I think to some extent, whatever one says, I think vehicular pollution is also something that's pretty significant. And then, of course, coming in the festive season, I know it gets very sensitive, but you still have miscreants who, despite whatever firecracker ban, will still go ahead. I think lastly, as the Delhi winter approaches, you have loads of private security guards outside very fancy homes, where you have these people lighting up rubber tires, anything to keep them warm. I think a combination of all this is what's getting together. And until there are strict laws in place that prohibit some of these things. So one is working severely with farmers in finding out alternate modes of disposal, and maybe even compensating them for things that they would use otherwise as the remains of this burning that they would use. I think that's one. But also to take into cognizance things like construction dust, rampant vehicular pollution. I think all these things need to be addressed in a manner where anything above AQI of 150 or 200 creates a sense of panic. Today, we're kind of learning to live at 400 as just another day. We're sending kids to school in
Absolutely.
what can actually take a toll on their lives.
Absolutely. We're okay with air quality levels at 350 to 400. Some people are even doing their early morning walks and exercises outside in the open. That's how used to become to pollution. Let's hope that we don't have to be for a very long time. But for now, we need to take a short breather here on the show. We'll be back with lots more on the other side. Keep watching News 9 Live.
Let yourself flow with the turn of each tide.
Salty winds, you sweeten your ride.
Maharashtra,
Maharashtra is the hit.
Maharashtra tourism.
Hey, why are so many lights on? Is it Navroz?
Settling accounts, uncle?
No, writing a love letter. Check your accounts every day and ensure there is no mismatch. Exchange sends trade-related messages daily. Do timely verification. And if there is a mismatch, inform the exchange immediately.
Soch kar, samajh kar, invest kar.
For the very first time in our investigation, we unmasked the killer of Ravindra Matre.
In 5G, we have to stand with the world, and in 6G, we have to lead the world.
Winning a Grammy was an absolutely surreal experience.
Watching in your interest, and the big question we're asking here is, work from home or WFH bad for your mental health? Is working from home harmful to mental health? Is working from office actually better for better mental well-being? Well, that's what the findings of a recent study say. The Work Culture and Mental Well-being Study, carried out by US-based mind research organization Sapiens Labs, surveyed nearly 55,000 employed individuals across 65 countries this year. Now, this survey had a sizable chunk of over 5,000 respondents from India. The study measured the levels of well-being using a tool called Mental Health Quotient, or MHQ, which measures 47 different aspects of mental health and calculates an overall score for mental well-being that's called Mental Health Quotient. And what were the results? The highest mental health quotient belonged to those who work fully in person in an office, and the lowest belonged to those who work fully remote or working from home. Those who worked on a hybrid basis were somewhere in between. Now, those are the global averages. Specific to India, the study, which looked at 9 different aspects of work culture, says Indians who worked from offices had better mental health than those who worked from home or were in hybrid arrangements. This was unlike those in Europe and the Americas, where hybrid workers had better mental health quotients. The study says that good relations with colleagues and a sense of pride and purpose were the most important factors that impact mental well-being. Poor relationships with colleagues and a lack of pride and purpose in work has been found to be producing severe feelings of sadness and hopelessness and low motivation levels. In India, the correlation between poor relations with colleagues is higher than the global average. The study also finds that there is an increase in mental well-being along with the increase in the size of the teams people are working in. And this is also stronger in India than in the Western countries. So the study essentially says not just going to office, but working with more people at the office while you're there is better for the mental well-being of employees. Unlike the popular assumption that working alone and from home is the best recipe for good mental health. Also, recent findings from the annual Work Trend Index of Microsoft India reveal that 62% of employees feel that work from home demands an excessive time commitment. 32% of employees are exhausted because of the digital nature of the work. And more than 70% of Gen Z workers said that they were struggling mentally. Now, these findings have come at a time when there is a raging debate about work-life balance in India. A debate that was triggered by the recent death of a 26-year-old chartered accountant in Pune. Whether work from home or not, good relationships, good human relationships seem to be the key to better mental well-being. Dr. Srinath Sridharan, policy researcher and corporate advisor, is with us. Srinath, interesting, wouldn't you say? I mean, we all thought that the pandemic awakened us to the need for a better work-life balance, and that can only be achieved by not going to the office. But that doesn't seem to be the case exactly.
Krishna, I mean, while the report has been very exhaustive, including the number of parameters that they've tracked, I think it is also counterintuitive to say that some of the comparisons between the Western world and the Indian world are slightly different, and I want to bring about those. One, our average age of the cohort that we are speaking about in India is far younger than the Western demographics. That's one. Two, the average infrastructure for work from home or work from anywhere in India is very different from the quality of infrastructure. And what I mean by that is, let's say you're sitting at home in let's say in the US or somewhere in Europe, it's quiet. Imagine an Indian home being very, very quiet during the day, assuming that there is no noise pollution from the outside road. The internal one, the amount of bells and phones, that's a different context. Third, I think human beings are, I think, very, very clear social creatures. So one of the expectation is our human cognition and social engineering that we want to do demands more people. Let's say during COVID, it all worked fine because we were able to do that. We couldn't go out, and work became almost a social aspect of it in a lot of cases. And while we are continuing now, we kind of zoned out and said we'll continue working from home. And the sheer digital overload is because of our own probably lack of self-discipline. When do you switch off? And I think here, I think both of us, both the stakeholders, the employees and the employers are at fault. I mean, I just want to provoke you, Krishna, for a minute. I mean, look at your own industry, media industry. I mean, you pride yourself by saying 24/7. And if I ask your print or digital colleagues as well, there is nothing called a stop. There is nothing called saying that, hey, you know what, my shift gets done at 6 o'clock.
Well, Srinath, we are an outlier of an industry. You know, we don't have the luxury of work from home like IT professionals. We have no option but to come to office. Even during the pandemic, we had to come to the office because the studios are over here. So we're not comparable.
Right? I mean, no, that's true. But the fact is, the studio today can also have become like Zoom, right? I'm joining a studio from a Zoom call, sitting at home. So the reality is, I think today the digital, I have some goodness, but we don't know, we are not disciplined enough to say when do we cut off. So I kind of still think in a report like this, yes, it is satisfying to say that we need to place emphasis on mental wellness. But the reality is to taking it overboard, because I can hear another argument coming from you in the next, let's say, a month or two, with a group of HR practitioners saying this is why we want people to come back to office, as if that is going to change productivity. I think productivity measures are still evolving, Krishna. The reality is, I think the corporate world, at least the formal workplace methods, are still finding that difficult, because you have the command and hierarchy structure in India. I mean, anywhere in HR world. How do we get youngsters to listen to you with influence?
Well, that's a big question. Quick comment from you, Lloyd. Talk to us. You work with enough and more companies. WFH or WFO?
I think the answer, like in everything, lies somewhere in between.
Okay.
I do strongly agree with the findings of the report. I do agree that people just kind of cutting themselves from the outside world, working in the private confines of their home in a work office. Not only do they work more, I think they also tend to get a little bit more stressed. As Srinath rightly pointed out, humans are social animals. We need to meet real people. We need to shake hands. We need to have our time off at the coffee machine. We need to do those things. I think that's an important part of growth. Through the pandemic, when of course everything kind of went to lockdown mode, I do believe that people who had a long history in an organization were able to transact work from home much better, because you have a history, you know people, you know their likes and dislikes, so you're able to work that through. Whereas youngsters who just started off in 2020, they had that handicap, right? You're dealing with nothing but a small image on a Zoom screen window with people, and you don't know the background. So I do believe that the real solution is hybrid.
Okay.
Having said which, I think I want to touch upon 2 points. I think one is we've yet to evolve a proper work from home discipline. By that I mean is that if someone is going to spend 8 hours at home, need to provide for these little breaks when people step out, grab a coffee, maybe interact with some family member, maybe take a walk around. I think that's one. 2 is, even in the context of office, which sometimes gets very stressful, how do you provide for that flexibility, right? So if I'm doing an 8-hour work in a big office, can I get that half an hour that I step out, possibly catch up with friends? I think we need to provide for that balance. Just strictly saying that the survey is going to be kind of pushing people back to the office, I think maybe a little too skewed. So I agree with Srinath, but I do think working from home is taking a toll on people's mental health. Completely agree. And specifically for younger consumer, work office workers, I think it's a significant.
One thing that we can all agree to is that human beings are social animals. That's what the study has revealed all over again. But the solutions are yet to be found. For now, Lloyd and Srinath, thank you so much for taking time out to be with us here on this edition of Indian Interest. Completely out of time over here. Thank you so much for watching. This is Krishna Kumar signing off.
Why is the state not looking at putting an embargo on that?
As a Telangana person, I will not accept.
How do ordinary folks deal with this?
Joe Biden is not going to be the Democratic presidential nominee.
I made my choice. Kamala Harris. She's experienced, she's tough, she's capable.
I took on perpetrators of all kinds, predators. So hear me when I say, I know Donald Trump's type.
I am the one saving democracy.
He has tapped into the fear and anxiety about demographic change in the US.
Polarization in the United States. Some people are even suggesting that there could be a civil war.
You are this unable to solve your own domestic problems. You have no right to claim to be anybody else in the world, and we're moving into a multipolar world where the United States will not lead.
This and more. Streaming on